Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. Listen, I know that this initiative to help veterans is a big deal. It's a lot. Some of us may not be ready to do it right now, but you may be ready to do this in the future, meaning you need to start creating a plan. This is not something that's going to go away, but it's pretty hot right now. And it is not as difficult as it may look because these are large dollars that we're talking about. But there is currently only a handful of nonprofits and private companies that are doing this because, as I said in my YouTube video, not a lot of people know how to do government contracting the right way to win. But this is just something that's very serious. You need to understand it. We don't have to be perfect to win. We can't always depend on the government to teach us how to do these things that they need help with, but that's our job. So, and it's my job to help you guys learn more about how you really can build an amazing business and government contracting in general, but it's not a hustle. And I know those of you that are here, you get that. It does take time. All of us, well, I believe most of us have businesses. And even if you don't, you know that these things don't happen overnight, but you can look up 2 years later and exactly what you plan to do is done. I'm an example of that. I mean, I know I've been in business a lot longer than many of you, but sometimes we're so busy doing all of the right things that we don't realize how far we've come. And then the next thing you know, our dream has come to fruition, or a vision, I should say. And the reason I prefer vision over dream is because sometimes we think dream is not real, but this is not something that you could take lightly because, as I always tell you guys, you can win. And you need to understand what will be expected of you to win something like this. This almost reminds me of the staffing contracts a little bit, except that it is set up different. Medical staffing is very serious business and it's a lot of work. It is. What I do is a lot of work now. The manufacturing, a lot of work. There's some things that we're going to do in big government that's a lot of work, but it's extremely rewarding and it's pretty profitable, or can be, if you do things right. So before I go into what we're going to talk about today, session will be recorded. If you like, when you have a question, you can turn on your camera. You just need to turn it back off because it's recorded and I don't want to invade your privacy, but or you can just raise your hand. And it looks like, we're going to have a smaller group today, so I will have enough time to answer questions as we go. We have about an hour and a half. I do have a hard stop at within an hour and a half, probably an hour and 40 minutes. Okay. Because I have another meeting after that. But let's go ahead and get into it. Thank you guys again for being here. I will allow Rebecca, I want you to stay the host so that you can handle people as they try to come in. Okay. And for those of you that do not know me, even though most of you should know me, because we only invited people that, generally work with me. So one of the first things I want to do is just give you guys a brief overview of what's going on with the veterans. We used to have about 300,000 veterans that were homeless and displaced, mental illnesses, hunger. We have a lot of problems with our veterans today. So here's another thing I want you guys to keep in mind. Even if you're not ready to do the housing, there are other services that I won't cover in detail today. There are other services that you can provide, maybe even in your state, to other companies already doing this. Because, I plan to do this when I retire. You guys know I want to retire early. So I already have that all mapped out. This is one of the things I want to do, but I don't want to do food services and mental health care and things like that. So what I would do is I would bring people in to do these things, and they would be included in my cost. And so you need to think like that too. Let's say you said, I'm not ready to buy houses um, in my state or in other states, but, or even lease a house, because you don't have to own the house. All you're doing is solving problems. You're bringing solutions. You could literally find an abandoned hotel and do something with that hotel to put veterans in it. We have to be creative in government contracting because nobody else is. The large companies, they have the money to just do things. So, they can do them, but they're not like us. They don't think outside of where they are. They do things that will only benefit them, not benefit. It's not usually a win-win. They may not want to take on a small motel or hotel that has just been sitting there and nobody's using it. I would do something like that. I see lots of housing happening in different states. I would, which is part of my plan. I don't know that I want to buy every single house that I see for this, but I probably will make agreements. At least this is part of my business concept for this type of opportunity. I will probably work with developers or owners of properties that they cannot do anything with those properties, because what's happening, at least in my state and other states, they're so expensive, nobody can afford them. The government can, though. The government can pay for those houses. I would charge them. So if a house is, $3,000 and this um, contractor just has them sitting there, or some type of organization owns all of these properties, but they're not being rented or they're not being leased. I may not want to buy all of them, but I may want to tell them, because I'm doing the same thing locally. I'm not just doing it for veterans. We have a housing crisis in my state as well, which a lot of you may know that for your own states. But I say this to say that there are lots of creative ways if you open your mind and you understand what the need is, what the requirements are, which we're going to talk about today. There are lots of creative ways for you to get involved in this. And again, maybe you have a food service business. Maybe you are a healthcare provider. You can do that yourself. A lot of you guys, I have nurses, I have doctors, I have all kinds of people that come to me to learn government contracting. So, maybe there's insurance that's needed to cover the houses. And I was just talking to my insurance guy who does all of our insurances for manufacturing, our key man insurance. He does all of our property, for our items, for our clients to protect us. And I was telling him, one day soon, I might need you to come in and start talking to some of our clients from my other company, which is FedBiz Exchange, because he's really good to us. He makes me feel safe by taking away all of the issues and explaining everything. I don't mind paying money. I mean, I have to pay the money, but I'd much rather have someone like that, because when you own properties like this, or when you're involved in something like this, and it's not that expensive all the time either, but when you're involved in something like this, should you have liability coverage? Sure, maybe $1 million. Maybe as you grow, you want more. But it's not even, I mean, you can get $1 million worth of liability insurance, even with no experience, for $1,500 or less, depending on your state, depending on what you're doing. So those are the types of costs that you're going to incur that may never change. But for your first contract, you could add that into the contract. But we have all of these homeless veterans. We're down to from 300,000 down to, I just read the other day, I always try to go back and do updated research. We're down to about 49,000, and we're still in trouble, because those were numbers from last year, and I got those from the VA, but we're still in trouble. So, and how do I know we're still in trouble? Whenever you hear the government, and I know they don't talk to the regular public, but they talk to us. Whenever you see a bunch of sources sought in any industry for any service or product, that means there's a problem, a huge problem. So They need people like us to be creative, to think about ways that we can assist them. But I want you to not put blinders on about what's needed, because you can easily find these companies that are similar to what you want to do that may need other help. It's like the senior homes for veterans. Maybe you're not ready to buy a senior home for a veteran, but certainly you could offer services to that senior home, because nothing is going to change. Maybe you offer your healthcare services, maybe because they have a hard time keeping up. I mean, when I say they, I mean the owners of the senior homes, the retirement homes for veterans, they have a hard time finding good help. They have a hard time, so that's something that I added to the staffing portion for seniors, but it was mostly for veterans. So that we have to be creative, we have to think outside the box. And how do you learn these things? Just by kind of being nosy like I am and doing research. I also have a goal to help many of you, hundreds and hundreds of you, win government contracts. It's a personal goal and passion of mine, and not just to stay small, because I really believe it's a gold mine and it's a secret and it's something you could be passionate about. Is it work? Yeah, it is. Most of it is, even the products. Because once you start getting into the millions of dollars or even hundreds of thousands, you're working, but you're building something for it to work by itself. That's always my goal. And I'm still working on that with FedBiz Exchange because it's been so attached to me. But my other companies, they work by themselves. I mean, I work in the manufacturing, but I have a team that I don't worry as much. And that's where I'm trying to get my team with FedBiz. So they're comfortable. They don't have to worry as much. So you could do the same thing with this, but you have to set it up first. You have to build a model. So even though these homeless veterans are most vulnerable, they went out to protect us and keep us safe, and they still do. And we don't have enough help for them. And it's not the government's fault, other than that they don't discuss these things publicly enough. We only know about it because we're here, because we are government contractors. So the VA has a specific goal. And by the way, housing and homelessness and transition housing and emergency housing is not just with the VA. Sometimes it's with the Bureau of Prisons, which you should apply this exactly to the same situation, the Bureau of Prisons. They have a lot of, and some of them are veterans. Sometimes veterans get in trouble and they go to jail. So some of them, and they still have benefits, for when they get out. But the Bureau of Prisons is probably your other big agency that you will see. They have a lot of programs for emergency housing, transitional housing. They don't give them as much as the veterans get, meaning, they may just give them a stipend. I don't know if they would have food service. I don't know if they would have some of the amenities that the veterans have. So the VA's goal is to place at least 41,000 veterans experiencing homelessness into permanent homes. So how does that work? Well, you help with that. It just depends on where the veteran is. So you will see as we go through this, there are different types of veteran homeless problems, different types. Some is transitional, very quick, meaning a transitional could be a year to 2 years. They let them stay in there until housing is provided. You might decide, well, I want to be one of those people to provide them permanent housing, because the government is likely paying for that too, quite frankly. So, because veterans get benefits, they get all kinds of benefits. Schooling, you guys know this, most of you. Schooling, my husband was a veteran. I met him in college. We met in college. But he still has things that he could use anytime he wants to. Housing, special loans. The problem with veterans is that they don't know how to use their benefits, even their health care sometimes. They just, I mean, I have two very close veteran friends also. My vice president, my manufacturing, he's a veteran. But I asked him, why didn't you have these issues? Why didn't my husband have these issues? Well, I kind of know why my husband didn't. We met in college. He had a very normal life, but I didn't know why he didn't, my vice president. And I don't understand why some have these issues and some don't. I would imagine it has to do with education and upbringing. And like my vice president said, well, a lot of that is it. I mean, he said we see things happen while we are, he was in Afghanistan, while we are at war or while we're away. He did some black ops stuff. And now my husband was in the Air Force. He was in a dangerous field, but and he traveled the country, but he wasn't at war. He did not go to Afghanistan. He did go to Korea and places like that, but he did his situation was different. He was more of a even though he was an engineer, he was more of a professional um, fuel systems engineer. So he didn't see as much danger. A lot of his work was with planes. But my vice president, he's been out there and seen the danger and the people that he managed. And like he said, these things affect them, and so they come home and they cannot fit into society. And there are programs. Don't get me wrong, but we need more. There are programs. Some of you may think about things like, because this could be part of the transition, like helping them to find jobs. There are just so many benefits for them that they just don't know how to use. Okay. So also 95%, the VA wants at least 95% of the veterans that are housed in 2024, which is about us. This stuff can't happen without us, that they do not return to homelessness. Now, how does that work? How does that happen? It happens because of what I said on different occasions where I talk about other services. So you may see an opportunity that you like, but maybe they want them to have mental health care and you don't want to deal with that. Well, you don't have to be the mental health care person or the entity that provides that. You would just need to hire one. So as part of your setting up the business model or your concept to respond, because when you respond to this bid, yes, some of them are where you're just filling in information, but most of them are will ask you and need to know that you have a quality control program in place. So they might say, we need mental health added to this, 10-bed situation. Can you do that? And you would say, well, yeah, I can. All you'd have to do is go and get what we in government contracting call a subcontractor, get some pricing for them for what it would take in order for them to provide that mental health. And that could be one mental health person. It doesn't have to be a whole team of people, doesn't have to be a whole company. So those are the things that you would have to do. Now, you may not want to do that. So you look for something that's, only for beds and food and maybe transitional job assistance, something like that. So you will be able to decide what you want to go after. It doesn't have to be either or I shouldn't say that. I meant to say it the other way. It doesn't have to be this and that. It doesn't have to be both. It can be either or, is what I meant to say. You could also choose the types, which we'll talk about. So they have some goals themselves. They know this is bad. They know this is pretty bad. Also, they want to engage. So what does that mean? They want to engage with at least 40,000 unsheltered veterans. That means that they have initiatives. You may see this under government contracting, where they want someone to give them a program to engage with, go out to some of the shelters, or I should say the areas where the shelters are, because even though there are some shelters, a lot of them are filled, and this is why they have to do things special for veterans. Veterans have to have their own because, again, like I mentioned earlier, these states have a lot of homeless problems. I couldn't even believe, I didn't even know we had a homeless problem until I went downtown, and they're fixing it now because regular people are complaining. They don't want to see that. So, but we don't have enough shelters, I guess. There's just so much going on. And when I said that I will do this on a state level as well, my state is begging us to do not homeless, but they're begging us to do housing, period. People with Section 8 housing, because housing is so expensive everywhere. Texas, Arizona, those used to be some of the cheapest places to live. Arizona was one of the nicest places to live and cheaper. Nice, clean, beautiful. It's still clean and beautiful, but it's not cheap anymore. Not anymore. Which I don't even know how people live, to be honest with you. I don't even know how they're making it. Fortunately, in my family, I mean, we're just very, very fortunate that we don't have those issues. But because, even though we've been in Arizona for a long time, we've also had, our ways of life financially for a long time. But what if you don't have that? What if you just graduated and you don't have, so you just don't have those things? So not only is it bad for regular people, it's horrible for veterans because they have the benefits, but they don't know how to get them. Or it's a line to talk to someone. That's where I've always been created. I creative. I find out what the problems are. And I've done other things with veterans. You probably saw my video where I talked about the healthcare for the veterans. When Obama had to come in and do something with that, it was so embarrassing. Veterans waiting 60 and 70 days. So that might be something you have to do. They might say, well, we need you to have 10 beds, but we also need you to have the healthcare come in or have them go to the veterans hospital. So what does that mean? You don't have to do the healthcare, but you might have to have transportation. So things like that. Okay. But they're out there. They have people like us that are interested in working on this. So you will probably continue to see a lot for many years to come for the veterans homeless situation and housing situation. Okay, so lastly, this is a big deal. I do know about this because I've talked to people that do it for the state of California, not for veterans, but they didn't know they could do it for veterans too. The state of California, their situation, I just really do. They're probably the worst situation when it comes to housing because they've had that housing crisis with affordability for a very long time, and it's all across the country now. Affordability because the wages are not matching affordability of housing. So the Veterans Administration, you may see a lot for California, a lot where they want to permanently house. I've never seen the government's focus or put a focus on a state like this. California must be awful where they don't, and Texas is too, by the way. It's not that it's awful. I've seen where they need so much for Texas. And so California and Texas, but Texas must be getting the help. California can't have enough help. They just need a lot more. So they want to permanently house at least 1,605 veterans experiencing homelessness, and then engaging with 2,184 unsheltered veterans. So again, you're going to see other types of programs that come out. That's why you should be watching this. If you're not ready to deal with the housing part of it, then you need to watch for other types of things that you could do to service this industry, which may not cost you other staff. It may be just you putting a plan together, helping them do this engaging part. So keep that in mind. Okay. So let's talk about the earning potential. How do we do that? Well, we do that by doing what I've always talked to you guys about doing. You always need to do when it comes to government contracting, always do your research. And it doesn't take that long. You just need to know what the codes are. A lot of times you guys don't have the codes right. But in this case, with veterans and housing types of contracts, no matter whether it's emergency, homeless, transition, it doesn't matter. They are using consistent codes. So the PSC code, those of you that do not know, product service code for veteran housing issues is G004. So, and then the NACE codes can be a little bit different. They start with 623, but your PSC codes are the most important codes in this situation, and your keywords, because that's how you come in here and look to see. If you were with me the first time with part one, where we just looked to see what was out there, and then we walked through that sources sought. It's one of my last recent videos that I put out there. We walk through the sources sought. That's how we know. You can also do things like just put in the keywords of transitional housing, emergency housing, things like that. Now, you will find a couple of other agencies that need housing, like the Bureau of Prisons. You will also find another one I didn't mention was there's an Army one that sometimes needs housing, but those would be your three. Okay. All right. So let's look at the earning potential. Now, I did run a report. I looked at the past few years, actually the past 3 years, a little more than 3 years, and the amount of awards, I did break this down on the next screen, but the amount of the awards are pretty decent. Now, of course, it's all relative. I mean, you make 200, you offer the government $200,000 as an example to take care of 10, or house, or I should say bed. Let me just make sure we're all house 10 veterans. What happens? Well, you're telling them, okay, I can charge you $200,000. I'm looking at this first one up here, $204,000 as an example. You see this, my arrow to the left, potential award value. This was a huge report for those of you guys that have never been with me before. I clean these up. I show you how to do that very quickly. I clean them up, and then because there are certain things that are very important, like what are these contract award amounts? And as I go through this to get to the $3.9 billion, we go on average anywhere from 500,000 on up. Now, some of them are a little bit smaller, but that's just possibly 1 year, or that could be maybe a 3-month situation, because they have them as low as, for instance, transitional housing or emergency housing. I could see a $200,000 award, but that's not a 5-year contract either. So we'll talk about all the different types of housings, but $3.9 billion, I know that it sounds like a lot, but it's not. It's not for the problems that we have with veterans. It should be more like $10 billion. The Veterans Administration is the only agency that has everything by themselves, meaning they don't have a lot of little baby agencies underneath them. So you take something like Health and Human Services. Health and Human Services is a huge, powerful agency. That is the agency that spends most of the money, aside from DOD. But they have a lot of little baby agencies underneath them, baby departments, like Health and Human Services has the CDC under them. They have NIH under them. Veterans Administration doesn't have that. They have all of their money to themselves. They don't have to dish out money to different agencies that are underneath them. They are one powerful entity. So this number should be actually higher, but it can't go higher if they don't have anybody to do the business with them. So if you and I are not interested in helping because this is just housing. I didn't do anything else. I didn't look at, because, healthcare might be added in with the housing, but we don't know how they do that on the back end. But this is just for housing contracts specifically. Okay, so, and the Veterans Administration, they do everything that way, meaning all of their hospitals, they handle the budget for their hospitals. They are a very powerful organization, and they do a lot for their veterans. They just don't do a good job of making sure that they know, so their veterans don't get taken care of the way they should be. I often feel very strongly about how we treat our veterans. Now, that didn't happen to my husband, that didn't happen to my vice president, because they are educated men and they knew how to maneuver the system. Maybe they, like my husband, he didn't really need much from the system. But these are all of those other people that they don't know how to maneuver the system. They don't know where to get help. They don't know where to get help to stop using drugs. Maybe they tried and the line was 30 days long. I mean, 30 days until they could actually get in to see a counselor to help them so that they can get off drugs and get off the street. So that's another one. They have drug programs. Some of your types of contracts that you will see are for drug programs, getting the veterans help. So the programs are there. The money is there. It's just getting the services. So if we look at this first column, sorry about that. If we look at this first column, you guys, if you know me, you know I like colors because it's just easier for me to read. I run out of colors sometimes, but I need it to be in contrast. But this first green column, column A, is the potential of the award amount. There's a lot of information when you run these reports, but you should always, if you're going to run a report to see what's going on, let's say you want to run a report in your state to see how much housing or how many veteran contracts are happening in your state. You could do that. You could do just the code G004, like I did. You go to USA Spending, G004, and do your state. And that's how you find out what's going on in your state. How many previous contracts have been awarded, when contracts are coming due also. You know, sometimes these contracts come due. You want to know that. But the potential award amount could mean, you know, for 1 year, this is how much they're going to get. For 5 years, this is how much they're going to get. Like if you look at number 4, that's a $2 million contract. So it's probably, oh, look at what it says. Oh, that's the name of the company. But, you know, when we run these reports, we are able to see the description of the services. So let me see if I can tell which description of services. Well, it says HV services. So that's a conglomeration of different types of things plus housing. So it probably has healthcare and things like that. So that's $2 million. More than likely, that is a 5-year contract. And it looks like it is because the performance period start date was July. I can see it in this yellow column, C. The performance period was 2022. So they have a little bit more time on that contract. Okay, but you might, oh, excuse me. No, they just started. I was looking at the wrong one. It's 2024. So they literally just won this. You guys see where I am? I'm on number 4. The award was $2 million. The action date was fiscal year was 2024. So yeah, they just won this. So they just won a $2 million contract, and that's for that HCHV services. So HCHV services probably includes a lot of different things that the veterans need. Now, what else? We always want to know the agency name, but we know it's the Department of Veteran Services. Now, sometimes I actually chose the Department of Veterans. But if I did not choose which agency I wanted to look at, it would have given me other agencies too, like the Bureau of Prisons. Okay. Recipient name, that would be the name of the award winner. I did organize this by, not in this one, but I played with it a little bit on the live one. I wanted to see how many of the organizations were consistently built, you know, going after these contracts and building basically a system and an empire of housing veterans all over the United States. It wasn't that many doing that. Most of them are doing it within their state. So, which is a safe place to start if you can also, you know, because if you want to start this right away, it's not going to be as overwhelming if it's in your state. That way you can check on the program. Even if you don't work there, you know, you're managing from a higher level because you're going to need a staff person or persons. You know, you may not need a lot, but you would need 24/7. And it really depends on the type of contract as well. Okay, so we'll get into that. The green right here next to the recipient name, the green right here is, I'm just making it a little bit bigger, is the place of performance. That's how you can tell where the home is or where they wanted the home to be. So if I wanted to find out how many contracts were awarded to help me start thinking about, okay, they award a lot of veteran homeless contracts in Arizona. And they do that mostly around this time because I can tell by the period of performance. I can also tell by the sources sought I see out there. I can tell by the number of solicitations I see out there. So, you know, but you want to know what kind of activity is in my backyard. Or you might even want to know, are there other services that these companies, the recipients, may need to provide that maybe I could help with? Maybe they're looking for a new food service company. You know, maybe they're looking for some people to help take care of the home. Maybe they're looking for different types of staffs, doctors, things like that. Sometimes, most of the time, you do not have to have a doctor in play, but if they have healthcare issues, let's say it's for skilled nursing, they're going to want to make sure that you have however many people that are needed, maybe 2 nurses. It just depends on the size of the home and how many people you're servicing. So, all of that is very important because that will be how you decide to choose which opportunities you want to focus on first. Okay, that's why we need to talk through some of these. I did pick one for us to work on, but you need to think about that. Okay, so, and then transaction description, it's right here. The column is AA. Why do I leave that in my reports? That's very important because I want to know what types of transactions or activities are happening under this contract. It doesn't tell you everything, but let's say I'm looking for something specific. Let's say I'm just looking for temporary housing. I might see that right down here to at the bottom. It's under transaction description. So maybe I highlight that one and I go back and I look at the solicitation number, and then I go back to Sam to pull down that old solicitation. I see what the award is. Maybe the award is, as an example, in this case, this temporary housing one, they got $2.6 million, and that just happened in 2023. So that's probably a 5-year, but they got $2.6 million. And, to me, I would think temporary housing might be cheaper or a smaller contract. But you know what that would incentivize me if I were interested in temporary housing, because temporary housing is, I won't say it's easier, but most of the time, a lot of times the temporary housing doesn't have a lot attached to it. You might need to give them beds and maybe some food, things like that. But I think that's a lot for a temporary housing contract. 2.6 million is probably for 5 years. They just got it. They're within their first year almost. They haven't had it for a year. But if I was looking for a lot of those, I would use this report to do that. Then I would go back maybe and run a report to get as close as I can to only temporary housing, because maybe that's what I like. And I want to find as many of those as I can. Okay. And then the last, let me just move my image over a little bit. So the 2020 column, it's blocking, but I can see it up at the top. So the AB column, the product service code, remember I said your PSC number? This is how you're going to search. This is one entity where I should say industry where I only see consistently one code, one product service code, and that's and maybe one more. That's G099, but mostly G004 is your key code. You're going to find, you see all of these types of descriptions under here. Under G004, you're going to find all types of housing programs. Okay. And then, and why are these codes important? First of all, they're important because if you decide to do this and you don't have these codes in there, contracting officers, if you've been with me, you guys know how I think and how I show you that things work. They're not going to be able to find you if you don't have the right codes in there. So even if you're already doing other things and you're winning other contracts, but you want to do this, eventually, once you make that decision, you should go back in and put this code in there, because they want to see small businesses doing this. They won't know how to
Thank you.
find you if you are not in there under the codes that they look for you under. Okay. So if you are not under the right codes, you won't find them and they won't find you. So you want those codes. Also, your keywords. Some of you, when you renew, maybe you don't do your small business dynamic profile, but if you ever decide to, you should be using I don't even know if the dynamic search will allow you to put in the product service codes, but it definitely shows the NACE codes that you already put in. But it does allow you to put in keywords. So social is a big keyword that's attached to the code, but these things are important. So that's how you find things. That's how people find you. When I say people, I'm talking the buyers. Okay. Two last things I want to talk about. Full and open competition. You see this orangey column, AD. So I wanted to look at that because you know what this is telling me? And this is a big report. I can share the report with you guys. It's a big report. There are not any small businesses in here. I don't even know if I saw one, which is my concern, which is why I teach you guys or try to get you to look at the world from a different lens because it's for you, it's here for you to go and get it, to come and get it. And, I mean, if they don't see us, what are they supposed to do? That's the law. They have to see you. And if they don't see you, why would they put a woman-owned homeless veterans contract out there when they don't see any women? Why would they do that? And I really need to get to this video, but there's a whole situation out there with the administration, the Biden administration, where they're saying women and minorities, not minorities, Black owned businesses and women, all women, are not getting contracts, not their share because we're not venturing out. We're not, because even if you do one of these and you get turned down, and some of them will ask you for past performance, but guess what? Past performance in most cases is not king. All you got to do, this 2.6 million contract for this temporary housing, all you'd have to do is be like 2.3. Price is king and a great package. You got your stuff together. So you guys know I try to encourage you not to be intimidated by this stuff. You need to be ready to win because you probably will win, as most of you do when you do what I encourage you to do. Okay, so all of these things are important, but there are no small businesses over here. There may be some. This is a big list, but I don't see a lot in these kinds of arenas. And that's why, I do this because I don't like it I hear us say, when I say us, I mean small business community, specifically minorities and women. We cannot say that they're keeping us out. And I know you guys don't say that. I don't say that, but people think that they're not keeping us out. We have to learn just like everybody else. And then they put it your way. Then they can set aside, but they can't set aside if they don't see you. The law says they can't. They can if they see you bidding, or if they see you with the codes, they come and get you. They ask you. Then they can do it, but they don't have enough time sometimes to do all of that. Okay. So now one last thing, the yellow column on the end, it's bad over here too. This is good for us, but bad in the sense that, these tens right here, this column is for the number of offers received. You know how I just said they can't set aside because we're not bidding? This is the column. Now you see a few tens right here, but when you see the whole report, all you're going to see is either blank, meaning there was no other offerer, or you're going to see, except the one that won, or you're going to see ones and twos and threes. That's the competition. Or you guys know I hate when we use that term competition, but I mean, those are all the other contractors that are making offers. That's it, to the contracted officers. That's it. So you see a lot of tens right here, but I don't know why. It could be because it's New York. But if you go down further, when you look at the full report, it's always 2, 3, 1, nothing. People are not bidding on these. So let's say you don't have any past performance, because not all of them ask for that, but some of them do. You don't have any past performance, but the reason you bid is because you got to show up. They need to see you. They need to know that you're there. But most importantly, you bid to win. And if you show up with the right numbers, and how do you know if your number is right? Because you're going to do some research to see if there was a previous contract. so that you can at least know what this other company that had the award. And sometimes these recipients, the award winners, they might compete with you again to win the contract again. Maybe they had it for 5 years, they don't want to lose it. They may come out there again and they will literally bid. They don't necessarily have the advantage, especially if you could do it for a whole lot cheaper. So if you could do it for 2 million and they're getting 2.6 million, but you can do it for 2 million, you're going to win. You might get more questions, but you're going to win because price is king. I don't care what people say. The only time price is not king is when, and this is very, very, very rare, because I know all of these industries. The only time price is not king is if they say, we need specific experience. If they don't say that, even if they say past performance is number 2 or number 3, and price, or let's say that they say evaluation, technical ability. Technical ability is what your business model looks like. If your business model looks good on paper and you've answered all of the questions and you look as though on paper you can meet the requirements, that's technical capabilities. So it's about how you present your package. That's number 1. But let's say past performance is number 2 and they say price is number 3. I guarantee you, if past performance is number 2, price is number 3, but your price is 600,000 or even 300,000 or even in some cases 200, 100,000, 50,000, depending on the situation, you're going to win because they have an obligation to go, our taxpayer dollars, they have an obligation not to overspend. If someone is saying they can do this for less and still do a good job, they must give it to you. And if they don't, they have to explain why they didn't. And usually it's because your technical capabilities don't look good. They don't trust that you can get it done. Now they can get away with that. They can even want to give it to the person that had it before, but price is king in everything that we do in government contracting. Okay, so I just made a chart, generally speaking. We've kind of already reviewed this, but I just made a chart to say the things that you need to think about and just to give you a snapshot of what's going on. But down here, I did go ahead and talk about the different types of housing contracts. And I did choose one for us to walk through and work on, one that is an actual solicitation, okay? But some of these are more complicated because they need more things. If you're nervous about doing this, but you want to do this, you should focus on just the housing if you can, or as often as you can, and then become more comfortable with how things work, because you should be doing this with the concept, unless you just want to do this work. It's like me when my first businesses, when I owned daycares, I wasn't planning to work in them and I never did, except I worked on the business, not in the business, because I had a staff. I didn't necessarily like daycare like that. I didn't even understand. I was a very young entrepreneur. I was in corporate, but I was still very new. And what it was that I love business. I realized I don't really want to be in the daycare business. It's a lot of work. And even though I had little children, I still did not want to be in the daycare business. It wasn't really but there was a lot of money coming in, a lot, but a lot going out. It was very different than this. We had clients, customers, parents that paid. And the government did give us a check for, because we had kitchens and things like that. They feed children that the government often feed daycares and schools, because some kids, their parents don't have the money to pay for lunch. Or if you, and my schools always offered breakfast, lunch, and snacks to the children. So because we offered that, the government would send us thousands of dollars a month. And I didn't even know we were supposed to get that. It definitely helped, but I didn't know we were supposed to get that. So, it's a business like that. It's a business where you're taking care of people, or You have people that are taking care of people. But this is a lot more, I would say, more lucrative. I mean, even back then, we were bringing in $20,000, $30,000 a month. But by the time that we paid all the teachers and the director, I had a director of the school, it was, I was lucky if I kept $5,000 a month. So, and some months were better than others, but it was a very expensive business. This situation is a little bit different because you're talking much larger numbers. You're talking about paying you for different services. So if it's just housing, that's what you're going to get paid for. So you're going to charge them a price just for housing. If you have to add food in there, then you need to add that to your service bid pricing template or whatever you use to come up with your pricing. Okay. So last session, we already went through where you guys went through with me the sources soughts. So I'm not going to go back through that, but you knew those sources soughts were out there, right? And I told you the G004 and also the keywords were the best ways to find some of those opportunities. But we need to talk about the types of contracts. And then a couple more slides, we're going to go over to the example that I chose so that I can have you to start thinking about what you're going to see and what you need to think about when you're looking at these different contracts. So just some of the ones I'm naming overall. We have transitional housing, that's usually about 1 to 2 years. Emergency housing, that can be a year, but it can be less than a year too. Long-term care, that's usually 5 years or more. Beds only 6 months to a year. And I'm just approximating and generalizing based on my experience. Respite care, that could be 5 years. Mental health definitely could be 5 years. Skilled nursing. Now I have 2 years, but that could be up to 5 years. It really should say 2 to 5 years. And the reason that these years are important is because when you're choosing these contracts, you should think of government contracting like this, especially when you're doing service, or especially when you win, even if you're doing products and you win an IDIQ or something, you should be building your business based on your revenue that you're generating. Well, if you have 3 of these contracts, you probably are doing pretty well and you're getting a profit from each of these contracts. That is how it should work. It's like us with our manufacturing. We don't worry about one area alone because you know what I always remind them, and they agree. We're not living off of one contract. I've seen businesses that I've developed. 8A's used to do this. They get a $4 million contract and they're all excited. Now you should be excited, don't get me wrong. But then I'm thinking, okay, where is I asked you to, once you win a contract, I know you've been focused on winning this, you won it. Now, how do you continue to get business? That's why you need a business model. Most of them don't do that. They just live off of that $4 million contract. That's not even $4 million a year. It's $1 million a year. And the profit is not what you're thinking it's going to be. You got 30 employees. So, I don't want you guys to be that way. I learned that early on. I was young then too, when I first started. After I got out of corporate, I started developing other businesses and showing them how I do things. But I noticed the way that we think is so in the moment. When you're winning, it's not just about winning that day. Yes, you're focused on it because it's a lot and you got to get it done, but it's about a process. You don't want to be doing this work unless you just like doing this work. It is to build your business so that you can hire people. And one of these, like transitional housing, I mean, you might have to have 24/7 coverage because they're going to tell you if they feel that they need to tell you what coverage has to be there, they're going to tell you you need staffing 24/7. That's one person 24 hours a day. It doesn't have to be, if it's only 10 people, you might need to think about security too, depending on the types of veterans that you're dealing with. It really depends because they have transitional housing for veterans that need assistance with drugs. So, or assistance with maybe mental health could be a situation where you need some type of security. So, but a regular basic transitional housing or emergency situation probably won't need security. You just need one person, you know, per shift, 24/7. You need coverage 24/7. Now, are you managing these people? Yeah, you are, until you are in a place where you could hire someone to manage. I did not have to manage when it came to my daycares because my husband found me, which I was so grateful for, a director that had come from New York and she had just moved to Arizona and she was experienced in running a school. I didn't know how to run a school and I wasn't interested in running a school daycare situation. I wasn't interested. It was a school. It had children up to 8 years old. I was not interested in all that. And then the teachers had to be trained. There had to be curriculums for the older kids, after school, things like that, because I wanted our school to be different. So it's a similar situation, but you won't need as much staff. And you'll probably have more profitability, way more than I did, because children are different. Managing children is different. So, and teachers, they don't make a lot. Now, the staff that do these kinds of things, they don't make a lot either. But, I paid my staff when it came to taking care of the children better than average because I couldn't believe that people were making that kind of money, that little money, taking care of children. And it's still like that. And it's like that with this too. So you might want to consider, don't be stingy, take care of your people, just make sure you are making money off of each contract, but understand you're going to get better care. I never had to worry about what was going on because I had competent people and she and I would do a report, every other day. I did the marketing, I did the financials. I was the visionary for the company, which is exactly the way it was supposed to be. I never had to work there. Now, did I have to when we first got the facility? You have to do something like this. When we first got the facility, did I have to clean toilets? And yes, it was my facility. I didn't care about that. My husband had to help with floors because we had to fire construction people. So when it's your business, you do what you have to do. You're not too good to do these things, but by the time that we got done and the facility looked the way we wanted it to look, and I had a 2-year-old child that I wanted to bring there. And so my child was going there. My child didn't go to a different school. She went to our family's school. So it's like if you had a veteran who was a relative, you want the care to be the best. And we didn't have to splurge, but we made sure that the children were comfortable. The place was always clean. We couldn't afford at first when we bought the first facility to have cleaning people. So we would come in there, me and my husband and our children. My older daughter, she was a little bit older. And that's what we would do. Make sure that then after a few months, when we saw stability, then we hired janitorial. So some of these things you may not be able to do right away. You might hire a side handyman or something, to do that could take care of a lot of your houses instead of hiring a property management company. So these are the things you need to think about. Okay. So we have mental health, 5 years, skilled nursing, 2 years, rehabilitation. I have one of my best friends who's a nurse. She does rehabilitation. They sometimes won't be there as long as 2 years. That could be 6 months up to 2 years. Because the fact of the matter is, if they have to be there longer and they're not getting better with the rehabilitation, then they move on to a different type of facility. Okay. Okay. So again, before we move on, just a couple more things. These are the things you have to think about before we go look at that example. Before we go look at that example, you have to, every solicitation or sources sought that you look at, you need to ask yourself these types of questions because all of you will be in different spaces, meaning some of you will love temporary housing. Some of you want longer term because you want those 5-year contracts. Some of you are healthcare providers and you know what you could charge and you know more about the healthcare part, and you probably will make a lot more money because you're providing skilled nursing and things like that. So each one of you will be in different places when it comes to what you're considering. But you need to consider, of course, what type of housing setup will you need. Now, one thing I didn't put here, well, yes, I did. Number two, I was thinking I didn't put local or national. Do you want to start out of state? Or does it matter where it is? That's something you need to consider. Is your state busy with these types of programs? And then also, here's one other thing I want you guys to consider. Does your state have programs like this that are not for veterans, but they're for seniors or people that have illnesses? California literally pays, the state of California literally pays for assisted living, skilled nursing living, and they don't have to be veterans. So some of our states actually already have a social services program like that, where they will pay you to take some of these people. Okay. And then number three, can you rent the facility, or do you need to own the facility? Or do you have a facility that you could use? That's always nice if you have a facility that you could use. So as an example, if you have a facility that you could use, you need to start checking into, for instance, you would do a search with the government to see if they have a need for veterans to go into a facility in your area. Okay. And then number four, what types of services will be included with the housing? That's a big deal because that is going to determine how much you want to do in this business. Like I told you guys, me, I don't want to do all of that. I just, now some things that they need, I don't mind hiring people to do that. My plan is to have someone that would be in a higher position that could manage all of these things for me. Because I know my life, and I don't think, even though I'll be retired, I probably really won't be retired. But even still, I'm thinking about that. I might not be able to do that right away because I need to learn a little bit more about how things work. But I don't want that focus for myself. What I want to focus on is getting the houses. That's going to be my job, getting the houses, because I want to serve as many veterans as I can. So my map, my vision is going to just recreate itself, which is what I want you guys to do. So even if you just start with one house or one situation, I want you to create that situation, develop it, and make sure that it's solid, and then you add another one. That's how you do. And that's how I see government contracting, period. The end. It's just like that. You create a system that works, you tweak it as you go, and then you just duplicate. You just do what you did over and over and over again. And you tweak what you need to tweak. And you have people that care about your business. You have quality control in place. What do I mean by that? We'll talk about that a little bit. You have you have policies about hiring and firing. You have people that sign agreements with policies and procedures. Your staffing. You have all of that organized so that people cannot sabotage what you're building. And I just got to say this. I love people, I do, but we don't have the best staff in America like we used to. People are just all over the place. The types of employees that you guys may have to hire, unless you pay them a little bit more, maybe. And do you have to give them benefits? No, you do not. But if you have someone that's solid, you may want to give benefits. At this stage in my business journey, realize a lot of people like what I call the gig economy. They're not staying. So you could have two or three employees, they may not care about being contract because we all know our payroll taxes can eat up a lot of our profits. If you don't have to have a W-2 employee right now, don't do it. But you give them incentives, meaning you encourage them to stay. You let them know, I would be willing to bring you on full time, and there are other benefits that would come with that based on performance. You do this for everyone. You have a policy about that. But what's happening right now is because a lot of people are not being developed in business. The things that I see in business, I just can't even believe it, how people are. Nobody takes the time anymore. So what can you do about that? You train your people. If you have 3 people to cover your facility 24/7, you need to have them trained or you need to train them. And you need to be no nonsense about this because, when you start taking care of people, just like taking care of children, you have to take pride in that and you have to protect these people. They are your responsibility. There are a lot of government contractors that do those programs for migrants and people that come over here. They make billions of dollars. They have had rapes happen, incest happen, not incest, rape, outside rapes, but internal problems with the people, the security that they have taking care of the migrants, all kinds of things. But it only happens, you don't hear about that with the veterans. That doesn't mean it never happens, but it's a different situation. But the reason that happens is because the people that win those types of contracts, they're similar to this. They're just not as cushy as these are. But those people think nobody cares about those people. But everybody knows, we care as much as we can about our veterans, so we're going to take care of them. But you got to make sure that you protect yourselves so that these things don't happen. And if they do, and your insurance, like I said, liability insurance is not that expensive. You will have to have other things because you have a property. So you might have some property damage included in that. But you can get even that much for $1,500. And it does depend on what your business model is and what you're doing. So it could be a little bit more or a little bit less. But the point is that you have to make sure that the insurance company is going to be comfortable with you. I do a lot of things because we're a new manufacturer. I do a lot of things to talk to my insurance guy. And I asked him, well, we have all of these policies and procedures. We teach our people these things. Does that help? He said, absolutely. Everything that you do to protect your environment, to make sure the employees are okay, to protect your products, your quality control is going to help you. Because I know my insurance bills, they keep getting bigger and bigger. Why? Because we keep adding things. The more product we make, the more product we have in the field, the more people we have. As we grow, my bill is going to get bigger. But my insurance company will be nice to me, or a little bit nicer, if they see that this is a conscientious business. And that's how this is too. So lastly, the number 5 and 6, you need to ask yourself for number 5, can you offer these services directly? Sometimes you can. Like I told you, I didn't even know the government was going to pay us for the food. Government might just, maybe they don't ask you for the food, but you could ask them. You could tell them, we can provide food, because it's not unheard of for you to have staff that are responsible for cooking. My director used to do the breakfast and the lunch for the children, which I didn't have to ask her. She said, well, we have a kitchen, so I could just do the breakfast and the lunch for the kids in the morning. And then snack is easy. So the next thing we know, after the government did their inspection and made sure everything was good with our facility, they told me, well, you have a food program for the children. I didn't know that was called a food program. I was just making sure we were feeding the children. It could be very much this way with the veterans. Let's say you offer something, and we talked about pricing. It's not just pricing. Pricing is excellent and pricing is king, but your business model and how systematic, even if it's not perfect in the beginning, but you show them, I got my stuff together. They're going to choose you over someone else. Not just because of the price, but also because they feel confident and comfortable that you are capable. Okay. And especially if you don't have past performance. Now, some of you will need to ask me, what does it mean when they say past performance? Sometimes they tell you what it means, sometimes they don't. It doesn't mean you have to have this massive situation. So we would look at that when we need to, as you guys do this. Okay, so lastly, how would you handle funding or cash flow? That's something you would need to think about. Do I think I'm a bootstrapper? I always have been. With all of my businesses, I started every last one of my businesses with nothing. I'm very, well, except that manufacturing. That's different. I've had to put hundreds of thousands of dollars already into that. Manufacturing is different. It is. But all of my businesses, I start with nothing. So can you probably start a situation like this with maybe $10,000? Sure. I mean, you'll probably be bootstrapping it, but again, it's about the type of housing. And again, do you own the house? Could you lease the house? You know, you need to look at your numbers and you need to decide. But some of you have money put away where you can afford to do this on a larger scale. You have 30,000, that'll be a lot easier for you, but you could also tell the government, because a lot of times they want to pay you monthly. We need to be paid biweekly. We will invoice you biweekly. For veteran contracts, it is a law within the Veterans Administration that you must make things easier for small businesses to get paid. But sometimes we don't ask because we didn't know we could ask. But you can't ask. It's the law. So they could say, okay, the only reason they do it every 30 days is because they're lazy. They don't want to do it every 2 weeks, but you need to make them. That way, small businesses can be in the game, even if you have money. Sometimes people think just because you don't want to just spend all of your money that you don't have it. That's not always the case. Sometimes you're just thinking things through, you're being practical. And if you could find a way to have the government help your cash flow because you are doing something for the government and the veterans, they can do it. Sometimes they can do it, but they're not allowed to not pay us timely as a small business. It's against the law now, too, thanks to Obama. He did that years ago because he saw small businesses didn't want to do work with the government because they heard, well, it takes forever for them to pay you. That's not the case anymore. Okay, so when I talk about the design, and then we're going over to when I talk about design and concept and the things you need to consider, I just wrote out some things about how I do things, how I think about things. You have to think about these moving pieces and you have to think about what does this process look like as soon as I take in a veteran into my house. So you have two situations really. You have the situation where you have to figure out what does that model look like? Okay, so it's a 10-bed emergency housing situation for 6 months. They just want me to supply food. That's it. That's kind of easy. So that's one part of the situation. That's what the business model looks like from a high level. Okay, so it's only 10 beds. I have to get the beds, a nice house, make sure it's clean and all of those things. And then I have to maintain a certain amount of food. So those are the two major things that you have to do because the government might just make it that simple. And maybe your quality control that they evaluate you on is those two things. There might be some small caveats, that they add to that. But if that's the business model, that's very simple. That's easier than some of these other things. But still, you have a whole nother set of process that you need to think about. So what does that mean? That means, what else, what does that look like when the veteran gets to the house? Well, I mean, who's going to greet the veteran? Well, I have to have 24/7 staff. So, I have I have 3 shifts and I have 3 people. I said I have 1 to 2 right here, but if it's 2, fine. If it's 3, if it's 24/7, which a lot of times it is, you're going to need at least 3 people. Maybe one person might say, I can do 2 shifts. I don't mind. If that's not dangerous, then you might let the one person do the 2 shifts. But most of the time, it will be 24/7. Okay, they'll tell you what they expect in these solicitations. Then, so you have to think about, so what happens when that person gets there? Well, what kind of registration process will I have? What kind of veteran orientation will I do? Because you got to train these veterans when they get there, basically telling them the rules. So you have to map out your rules. So your high level business model could be easy, but the internal process needs to be tight. It needs to be systematic because remember what I said earlier, you want to duplicate things that you do. You don't want to always reinvent the wheel. So what if they said you have to serve them hot meals? What does that mean? Where do you get that from? Who's going to do this cooking? Well, it could be one of these people over here. Who's going to do the shopping? It could be one of these people over here. Group homes do this. Same thing. Who's going to do the cleaning? Well, you might have a cleaning company come. Usually, I don't know about you guys, but cleaning services, I guess it depends on the state, depends on who's doing it. They're not that expensive. You might pay, maybe someone to come and do some light cleaning, but you could also maybe incentivize one of these people to do it. But you have to keep it clean. So you just never know what your team will do for you, especially if it's to earn some extra money. Now, I don't believe in using people up like that. I don't, because I think those are the people that will need you. You're always going to have employees that will overdo it and they don't mind, but you should incentivize a person, this is my opinion, that is doing meals and cleaning, unless it is part of their job description and you're already paying them for that. But these are all the things you have to think about. It's the inside stuff. You have to think about, okay, the veteran gets the orientation. Who assigns them to their rooms and things like that? All of that is going to be the responsibility of these people, but you cannot expect these people to organize this on their own. They won't do it right. They will not do it. So your place will be a mess. That's your responsibility, okay? Because you're the visionary. You're creating something that's going to work over and over and over again. The intake registration, what does that look like? You got to know who's going to be in your facility. These are things that the contracting officer may or may not say to you. That's the only thing about service contracts with the federal government. They don't tell you much of nothing because they kind of expect you to know. Okay. And sometimes they just don't know. Does the veteran have any duties? What if this veteran is supposed to be looking for a job every day? You don't have to hire a service, but what if they're supposed to be looking for a job every day? You need a computer set up and you need to make sure that someone is checking on them to make sure they're doing that. So those are the kinds of things that you will need to think about between those questions, and those are high level questions, and your business model. Again, you have two different situations. You have the structure of your business model, and you have also not just the structure, you also have the internal process that you need to deal with. Okay, so keep that in mind, and let's go over here and go through one of the opportunities that I chose for us. So I will pause the screen just for a second, and then I'm going to go over there, and I have it open already. We're going to look at one of these contracts. And the contracts themselves are not that difficult. Let me reshare. I'll make it a little bit bigger. Oh, I got to stop sharing. Hold on a second. Reshare. We're going to look at an actual contract, but I need to show you what they're asking for first. I should have gone to the Sam. I know you guys are so quiet. I know you're paying attention, but you're so quiet, probably because you don't know what to ask. I know this type of contract, it's pretty big, and it can seem overwhelming until you've done it. But let me just make this a little bit bigger. So this is Killeen, Texas, a temporary emergency housing situation. And let's just look at the highlights before we go over to the actual contract. So the highlight is, this is one that's due. For those of you that are not experienced with reading contracts, a lot of you guys have been with me, and I've trained you on some of this before, but here is when the contract, it was published, the solicitation was started April 1st. It is due, when you see updated offers due, May 17th, okay? At 2 p.m. Date offers due, it says April 30th, 2024, but they updated it to May 17th. And think about why that happens. You know why that happens? There are only a couple of reasons why the dates get extended. Either the contracting officer did not make everything clear, and people have questions that he or she, the contracting officer, needs to update, or they don't have anybody interested in not enough people interested in the opportunity. Okay, so that's what happens. So they gave more time to get this done. So it's due on the 17th. Now, if you wanted to see changes, of course, you would click here. But one of the things, two of the things I wanted you to notice is the product service code, which is what I talked about earlier. Most of these types, whether they're transitional, emergency, it doesn't matter. They will be product service code G004. Temporary shelter, they only have a couple also, 624221. These are those codes I talked about earlier that if you decide to do this, don't mess with your other SAM. Don't take things out, put these in, okay? It's okay for you to have two types of business. You might have a different website for this, but you don't have to. It really depends on what you do. We would talk about that if you needed to. Because I do caution you guys not to look like you're all over the place. I do, and I believe that. But some of you already do things that you could add this to your business and you don't look like you're all over the place. If they look too vastly different, yeah, because you first impressions are about, people feeling that you have the capabilities to do that. If they see you doing all of these different things, that may not look that good. And you can have multiple businesses in government contracting. You could create another name connected to your holding company or the name that you already have with SAM. You don't have to change your SAM and all that. There are things you can do. Okay, so let's get to it. I already have some of these open, but looks like this is when you see 001, 002, 003 attached to a document, that is an amendment. An amendment is important. A lot of times it's just giving you an update. It's probably an amendment saying that they changed the due date. You should always sign these and put them inside of your solicitation so that they know that you did go ahead and acknowledge this. This is a experience worksheet. It's probably like a past performance. We're not going to go into that. Usually, or not usually, I shouldn't say usually, sometimes you will see a worksheet for pricing. Not all the time, sometimes, because if they need healthcare, if they need work assistance, all of the things that they need might be in this spreadsheet, and then you put a price for those things. But I'm going to show you a very simple solicitation for this emergency housing, which is here. We're using this one. Okay, so when you see a lot of documents, don't let them scare you. Some of them are just information. Okay, so here is the solicitation that we open, but I also want to open this one too, the quality assurance, because this is what you're going to be measured against. You don't have to do much with it usually, but you're going to be measured against it. If you want to know how they're going to judge you, this is how they're going to judge you. Okay, and this one looks a little bit easier than some of them. I'm just going to open it up. We won't look at that one first. We're going to still look at the one that I have us on. So let's go over here to the actual, okay, here it is right here. The actual solicitation. I want to make sure you guys let me know if you can't see a solicitation on your screen, because that's what we're going to walk through. Also, never let these solicitations, no matter how big they are, scare you, because a lot of times it's just documentation. It's part of the FAR, things they have to say to you. But a lot of times you're just going to do a few pages. Like I'm not going to stay on this page right here. I'm not going to walk through this because this is what we call a 1449 and it's very basic. I want to get to the pricing and the scope of work, things like that. Okay, so this is the first page. Now, a lot of people will just hand in their solicitation like this. When I tell you how you need to prepare your package, I don't tell you to use this as your first page. You need a cover page. You can even put a letter, introductory letter if you want to, but you need a cover page. Never just submit a package with this as your first page. I mean, it doesn't guarantee that you won't win. It's just sloppy looking. Make yourself different by ensuring that they know who you are. How will they know who you are? Well, if they only receive 3 offers or 1 offer, they're going to know who you are. Even 10 offer. Why is that? Because they must look at solicitations, bids that have been offered to them. They must. They don't have to look at your capability statement if you're just reaching out and saying, this is what I do. They don't have to look at that. But this, If you submit a package, they must look at you. That's how you become known. They must look at you, but you have to be consistent. There are only a handful of these people. When I say these people, contracting officers that do this. So you'll get to know some of the names. They may not even be in the state that they are working on for a contract. They don't have to be in the same state. So a lot of times it's a group of them, four, maybe three, maybe four, maybe five, and they know each other. Not all the time, but sometimes they do. Okay, so I always tell you to go to the statement of work, or it could be called the performance work statement. Okay, so real quick, I'm going to go there just so we can look at a high level of what they're asking for, and then we'll come back to the pricing. Those are the two main things I wanted to cover with you before we go. So the performance work statement, which is often called PWS or statement of work, or there are a couple of other names, but for Veterans Administration, generally speaking, they're probably the neatest when it comes to their packages. They always will, in most cases, have a table of contents. A lot of the other agencies do not. The Bureau of Prisons, I don't believe they do. I think they almost never do. So just when you're dealing with the Veterans Administration, just know it's going to be a little bit easier. Here's that quality assurance plan, number 37. You also want to look at the evaluation. You want to look at the instructions right here. Always look for the instructions. I go to the instructions first sometimes because I want to know, is this going to take me a long time? Or is this just a regular package? Or do I have to do exhibits and all of these things? Go to the instructions. After you look at the scope of work, you can even look at the instructions first if you want to. It's up to you. But know that you can find all of those things, okay? Instructions also generally talk about evaluations. Like, let me see, did I pass evaluations? I might have passed evaluations. When I say evaluations, I mean, how are they going to judge you? How are they going to choose people? Is it, like I said earlier, is it price first, past performance, technical experience, or is it price, technical, and then past performance? If past performance is last, you definitely don't have anything to worry about. But remember what I said. If you know that this was a contract from the past and you can do better pricing and still give stellar service and you feel confident about that, price is going to beat out everyone else, even if you don't have past performance. Okay. Now let's just go to, it says statement of work was page 8. Or past performance was page 8. I want to take a peek at that just to see what they're asking us or what they're saying that they want. Oh, is this it? This might be it. Oh, this is a 5-year. Now that's interesting. It's emergency housing, but it's a 5-year. So this actually goes against what I normally see and what I was thinking. This is good. I mean, this is not bad. This is excellent. Usually, is it 5-year or let me see, 2025. So this means you would give a solid number right here for the unit cost for 2025 and a total cost for 2025. So this is really a good, easy one. Okay. So this one is 7 veterans per night. So this may not involve, it says per night. This may not be an all-day thing. You may need 1 employee for this, but let's find out. Let's keep going. So 2024, 2025, 2026, and 2027 and 2028. So you know what this probably is? This is probably one of those where they allow veterans to rotate in and out. So this may not be the same group of 7 veterans all the time. But if I were just starting out, this one looks like an easy one to me so far. Let's go to page 8 and see if we can tell what they're asking about. So I would look here. Oh, you guys should see my screen that talks about general responsibilities. And I highlighted it. I made it just a little bit bigger So the contractor shall be expected to provide safe emergency community-based residential housing. This is exactly what I was thinking it was. So this is great. This, if I were looking right now, I mean, this is not exactly what I want, but because I want something different. I want longer term, but for me, when I start with the veterans housing program, I would be looking for more of a situation where they're staying in the house for longer periods of time and getting the development and the help that they need. I'm doing this because I want to see veterans get better. Now, they may have this transitional housing emergency transitional situation for a reason. They could be transitioning these veterans out to a more permanent situation. But it says here, the contractor shall be expected to provide safe emergency community-based residential housing and quality services for homeless veterans with dependents. Now that's interesting. So that might require a little bit more. Referred by the Healthcare for Homeless Veterans. Yeah, that's the HCHV. Okay. It does say it's 24/7. So you would need to think about that. But this is exactly what I'm talking about. If you were interested in this, and I am going to send you guys something inviting you guys to join the program if you want to do this, if you're serious about doing this, this is something you want to learn. It will start the second week in June, but I'm going to give you an assignment for us to work on together and us to walk through together. This would be an excellent one. To me, this is easy. I think that it's one that probably is worth, I don't know yet. It could be worth quite a bit. If it's 5 year, I mean, we saw that one 5 year for temporary housing. It was an emergency. That one 5 year we saw was $2.6 million. So, and this is in Texas. I told you guys, Texas has a lot of problems too. So these are the things that you would need to think about asking yourselves this question. How many employees do I need? Even if you're out of state, Texas has still some pretty decent housing. I just happen to know because I do look in other states for housing to buy. And I'm very interested in real estate. I believe in real estate. I always have. But Texas still has, to me, reasonable properties. And Killeen, Texas, I think it used to be a smaller town. So but they're telling us right here, I like that they did this summary, but then they give you more background and all of that. Okay, I see I have a question or a comment. Are you into Candace? Hi, Candace. How are you? Candace is one of my star entrepreneurial government contractors. Candace has been out there winning those contracts. Candace, yeah, I mean, you and your team, I know you have your family support, your brother works for you. I mean, this might be something because I know that you have your hands full right now with all those contracts and but this could be something that you like. There are a lot of these in Texas. They need a lot of help in Texas. There are a lot of these for senior homes in Texas too, regular senior homes for veterans. So, okay, so this, I like that they gave us this much information in summary, but let me just read this part. The goal is that a minimum of 65% of veterans will successfully discharge into independent living. So I said that. I didn't see that, but I assume, and that's what I want. I want to be a part of, independent living programs for veterans. That's more of what I want, longer term. But this is not a bad opportunity. I like it. Some of you may like it too. So this is what I'm talking about. So you would take this situation and we would go through the process of how do I develop my plan for this? What are the things I need to think about? Because again, it may look easy from the high level of the business model on the outside, the structure of it, but it's the inside, the systems you need to create, roles and responsibilities, that kind of stuff, training your staff, finding the staff. What qualifications does the staff need to have? You just need to look competent because some of that stuff you're going to say in your proposal. This is what we do. This is how we do it. You don't have to tell them all of your secrets, but you need to let them know, when it comes to that surveillance. They call it surveillance. It's quality control, quality assurance. When it comes to that, if you can't do specific things or you don't meet those standards, you're not going to do well. So it's important for us to know what are the quality standards before we go into this, and what to focus on. Okay. All supplies, services, staff, and program management will be inclusive within the per day, per bed price proposed to government, and no additional cost will be incorporated. So your cost, your pricing needs to include those things. That's why, I gave you guys or give you things like the service bid pricing template. If you don't want to use that, you need to use it, create one for yourself. You need to consider all of the cost. And also we need to see, are there other facilities like this in Texas? Maybe even Killeen, Texas. So, this is really good. I really like this one. What else? Are there any other things that I want to, like, you guys could read this one yourself, but it tells you what they want the facility to have. So it gives you, this is the scope of work. So it's going to tell you all of those things. Okay, I see a question, or a comment. Yes, Candace, you were smiling at, yeah, I'm already trying to get you to do other stuff, and you have your hands full, but you're here. You must be thinking about your next step and your vision. So what else? Is there anything else? Now look at this. So this is what I'm talking about, case management services. Let's just look at this. Contractors shall have a case manager dedicated to veteran residents on site at least 40 hours per week. The contract case manager shall be a social worker. We talked about this. Licensed by the state of Texas. That's not that hard. You can look up a list of social workers, find out what they would charge to do that. Now, this is a lot, 40 hours per week. That's a lot, but you're going to put that cost in your pricing. So your social worker case manager would be a line item. Okay. Now that case manager, so what does that mean if you have to look for the case manager or get a case manager? Well, he or she will have responsibilities too, and they will be managed too, to a standard. Okay. Now, the truth of the matter is, some of you may want to be more involved than I would have liked to be involved. That's only because I'm used to doing bigger government contract things. That's the only reason. So I know how to manage things and people from afar and set expectations. But the reason I say that is because if you decided you wanted to do something like this, you could make yourself an employee, include your salary in there, or a salary, even if you have a salary from somewhere else. Now, what we do most of the time is, when we are going after service contracts, a lot of times we don't include ourselves as a salary if we're trying to get in the first time. We just don't. I have situations with my manufacturing where we look at all of our employees and decide, who is going to be a part of that cost, that service cost. Do the warehousing people or certain types of warehousing people need to be added to this contract? That's how you should do each contract, okay? Because some contracts will need things that others won't. We have chemical engineers that we need, but we may not need them for the whole company. They are part of a division. So you're going to have situations like this. This case manager will only work for maybe one of your homes to start out with. But maybe you want to be more involved because maybe you want to work with these people that have experience. You want all of these people to have experience, except you. You don't have to have experience. You need to learn. They need to have experience. But if you make yourself an employee, if you forego one of those salaries and make yourself an employee, pay yourself that salary, there's nothing wrong with that. So, because you need to see, what's going on. Okay. And then they tell you about the support services. Most of these are going to look very much the same. That is why you need a business model, because some of them, all you're going to have to do is move some things around. Then they tell you, what did I talk about? Cleanliness. Who's going to do the cleaning? Could you just have, I would imagine cleaning, Texas is a lot like Arizona. There's not a lot of, we can get cleaning and things like that for reasonable prices, whether it's a facility, whether it's a home, you can negotiate with people, and somebody like this who's doing your cleaning, if you're not going to have your internal people do it, you get another house, they do all your housing. You know, I try to incentivize people. My COO, I drive her crazy because she'll say, well, don't guarantee people. I said, I didn't guarantee them. I said, if you do this right, I got another project for you. You do this right, we're doing good. I can give you more work. She's like, I hate when you do that. Well, that's because my job is different than yours. I'm the visionary. I'm supposed to make people think about new opportunities. Your job is to watch out for the money. So you're doing your job, but I'm doing mine too. So remember what I said, you could have one of your people do this if you wanted to have them do the cleaning. Just open your mind to how can I make a lot of money, yet be very efficient, yet be very smart about how I plan this business model out. How can this be a win-win for everyone? That's what you need to think about and put that in your package. You don't have to tell them how you do every single thing, but you do need to meet all of these requirements. And that's what that quality assurance document is. It's something that they will review with you. And it looks very much like this. They have it, it's in boxes, and they'll say, you know, we might need to do an inspection. I don't know how often they do inspections, they'll tell you. But, you know, and they don't have that much time either. So it may not even be that often, if at all. Unscheduled absences, they want you to receive payment for an unscheduled absence. There's a specific process for that. So I really like this one. But now what we need to do before we go is, if you guys don't have any more questions before we go, what I'd like to do is I'm going to send you guys two things. I'll ask probably Rebecca or Katerina to help me send this out, or maybe even Torrance could send it to you guys because he's here too. But what I want you guys to do is look at this, because this would be an example of what I would have us walk through if you get into the program. Just even if you don't read the entire solicitation, you don't need to read this, the scope of work. You know, the solicitation, I told you, it's very intimidating, but once you get used to them, Candace could tell you, once you get used to them, they're not that bad. But you would need to set a price for every single year, and you can go up a little bit in pricing each year. Okay, so let's go back to, that's the big pricing. I thought I saw that they had a small pricing, like a small pricing chart, but I guess they don't. I guess they don't have a small pricing. This is it. They just want you. So what does all this mean? So sometimes this says LIN, but usually it says CLIN. They're the same thing. It's just the item number. Okay. This is how they track things, is by a CLIN number or LIN number. So the description is emergency transitional housing for up to 7 veterans per night. So you would look at, now you got to look at the scope of work and see what they want you to provide to the veterans, okay? Because you have to add all of those things in. And then you give them a price per veteran for 2,555 days. So you're gonna, once you get a single price, so let's say they want you to provide, this is just an example to make it easier. They want you to provide in that scope of work, the bed for them to sleep in every night, food, what else? Maybe, I don't know. I mean, that's all I can think of right now. Maybe toiletries. You might have to do that. I could see them asking you to do that. So the bed, food, and toiletries, those are all cost. You're going to add all those costs up, and then you would include that as the unit price, one price per person. So you would take that price and put it right here. Okay, that's your 1 unit. So if that price were, let's say it's $50 a day or $50 a night, that's what you would put here. Okay, the $50. But then you would have to multiply that $50 by the quantity of people. Okay, and that would give you the full price, like the total price, because they need to know what you're going to charge per veteran per night, per the 255 days. So you would take that $50, I'm doing this in my head too, that $50 per night for one person for 2,000, I'm sorry, 2,555 days. That's your 1 unit price. And then, no, I'm wrong. Just the $50 per night. I'm sorry, I'm confusing you guys. Just the $50 per night. And then that would be the total here for the 2,555 days. I think that's right. You have to be careful how you do this because it can be confusing. So 1 unit would be a cost for one veteran per night, but they would be there for 2,555 days. And sometimes this will look a little bit different. This one is saying quantity. It could say days over here and unit of issue here. Sometimes they do look a little bit different. But if you have any questions, this is where I would say, this is when you reach out to the contracting officer, just to make sure. I've had situations with medical items where I think they're saying one thing, and I'm good at this, I'm an expert. And I've had them call me and say, I just want to make sure this price is right. Sometimes when they do that, that means, uh-oh, my price is too low. Or they're thinking my price is one thing when it's something else. So you would do that for each year. So maybe that unit cost per person goes up every year. But the confusing part can be when they tell you how many veterans, how many days. And this is not a stupid question. So if this would be something, if this were something that's like, this just doesn't make any sense, you ask them, just make it short and simple. You ask the question. Okay, so that, because if you put in the wrong price here because we're calculating wrong, they could hold you to it. So you got to know exactly what that is. And I've had contracts where I've looked at the previous pricing and said, okay, they must be charging for this, or this must be how they're charging. So they're always going to give you the number of days. They're going to give you, usually they'll say beds or something. Here they're saying veterans. But they don't, the reason they're probably saying veterans is because they don't know how many veterans they're going to be on a regular basis, because this sounds like it's rotational. So you would read the scope of work and write down your questions. That's what I do. But I make sure I read it first, and then I ask the contracting officer. And if I remember correctly, if any of you are interested in one like this, remember there's always a deadline date for your questions. And I believe it was on the 25th. It's in one of the other documents. Sometimes they'll tell you when the deadline date is. It might be on the front page of the solicitation, but you need to make sure that you read the document, because you might read this document and say, that's not what that means to me. You might feel that this needs to be calculated different. Just make sure that you are adding up your costs first. What is it? Because they're going to tell you in the scope of work. I need to account for food for each person. I need to account for food. I need to account for the person's bed, and I need to account for the toiletries. So when you read this scope of work, this document right here, you need to be thinking about all of those things. Okay. So that's pretty much it. Yes, I'm a few minutes late, but I'm still good. I have time to be on time for my next meeting. You guys, if you have any questions, you can send it to the team. I am going to have us go ahead and this recording, I got to go straight into another meeting, but it's going to download, and you should be able to get this by later today. I am going to include this opportunity so that you guys can look at this as an example. I will let you know what the next steps are via email if you're interested in getting into the program. And if you're interested in learning how to do this, we'll give you all the details. I can tell you that it will be, it'll start the second week in June. Okay, it is going to be broken down. We cannot do all of this in a few hours or even in one day, because you need to absorb the concept of creating your own system for this. And this is not some fly-by-night money. This is money we're talking about building a business with. So it has to be right. And even though you see some of these people that I showed you on the spending list and they're making all these millions of dollars, don't let that intimidate you. It's not a lot of them. And it's only, most of them are doing things locally. They're not doing things nationwide. Some of you could do these things nationwide. Maybe you know people in California, then you can start looking at property in California. Now, I will tell you, if you have no experience at all, it will be a lot on you. So you need to make sure that if you have other contracts, if you have another business, can you do this if you have a job? Yeah, but if you have another job, I would suggest that you create a job for yourself. I would. Most of you have another business. If your other businesses are good, you could do this and run it from the higher level, because you have business experience. If you don't have business experience, you probably need to be involved because this would be your first business and it's huge. Okay, it's huge. It would be huge for a new person. So, but you need to think about those things. That's why I want you to see this and look at this and think about it. Okay. Thank you guys. I know you're welcome. Who is this that said thank you, Michelle? Who is this? Oh, is that Emily? Emily, is that you? Emily Ferguson, I think. Emily, you're welcome if that's you. You guys are quite welcome. This was fun to do, but it's a lot. I'll be interested to see if you guys are willing to move forward in other people and it will be probably smaller. I've done smaller, intimate programs like this before. I like it that way. I'm not saying that I don't want other people to have access to it, but because we can ask personalized questions and it's just more hands-on. Okay, so think about that. And then I'll send you guys more details and you can re-listen to this if you would like. Okay, Candace, I know you had to come back. You came back a little bit later, so you probably want to listen to the whole thing. All right, you guys have a great weekend. If I don't talk to you guys, and look for an email, okay, from the team with my name on it. I'll talk to you guys later. Have a good weekend.